The Great Strike of 1622, Episode 14. By 1622, the settlers believed they had won. Their towns were growing. Their farms were expanding. Their numbers were rising. They treated the Powhatan land as if it were already English property, as if the people who lived on it were simply in the way. But what they didn't know was that the very nation they thought was fading was preparing. Episode 14 is the moment when everything the settlers had assumed, everything they felt certain about, everything they took for granted, shattered. Because Opechancanough had finished waiting, he had finished warning. He had finished watching treaties crumble like ash in colonial hands. Now it was time to strike. The plan that Opechancanough built was unlike anything the colonists had ever imagined. It wasn't random. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't chaotic. It was coordinated down to the hour. He sent runners through forests, across rivers, along old footpaths older than the English language itself. Messages traveled from village to village, spoken in the shadows to avoid colonial spies. Warriors prepared silently, without gathering in large groups that might raise suspicion. Every action was precise, every signal was intentional. Every tribe involved understood what was coming. It would happen on a single day, a single hour, a single strike, across the entire colony. This was not revenge, this was survival. On the morning of March 22nd, 1622, settlers walked through their villages unaware of the storm forming around them. Some were farming, some trading, some eating breakfast with native laborers and servants they believed had accepted English rule. But those natives weren't servants. They were soldiers in disguise. When the hour arrived, everything changed. Across the colony, from Henricus to Jamestown to the outer plantations, native warriors launched a coordinated attack with extraordinary precision. Settlers were completely unprepared. They thought the Powhatan Confederacy was weak. They thought the natives were dependent on them. They thought peace was permanent. They were wrong. The strike was swift. Settler houses burned, supply routes collapsed. Dozens of plantations fell in hours. Over 300 colonists were killed, nearly 1/3 of the entire English population of Virginia. It was the single most devastating blow the settlers had ever suffered on American soil up to that point. The colonists called it a massacre. But to the tribes it was something else entirely. A message, a declaration. A warning written in a language the settlers could finally understand. We will not die quietly. The English reeled in shock. For years they had felt unstoppable, backed by the power of the crown. But this attack showed the truth they didn't want to face. They were not safe. They were not in control. They were not owners of this land. Reports sailed back to England describing the event as brutality. But they never admitted the cause. Decades of theft, lies, land grabbing, violence, and dehumanization that forced native nations into a corner. Colonial leaders panicked. They scrambled to rebuild defenses. They armed every settler they could. They passed new laws banning trade, travel, or interaction with native tribes. The dream of peaceful colonization was shattered completely. The colony now saw the Powhatan as an existential threat. But here's the truth the colonists refused to accept. The Powhatan did not strike because they wanted war. They struck because war had already been brought to them. The Great Strike of 1622 shook the foundation of the colony. It marked the first time native unity nearly pushed the settlers out of Virginia entirely. It proved that indigenous nations were not passive victims of history. They were active defenders of their homeland. But the settlers would not forget this day, and their response would be cruel, calculated, and devastating. Because episode 15 is where the colonists begin a campaign of retaliation, a campaign that would forever change the future of native life in the region.